but here we go. Let's see if it works, and hopefully I'm not disconnected again. Just let me know if it starts breaking up. I reset my router. I kind of like restarted, and it should be okay now.
At least I think it's much better than before. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let's go and start our exercise, okay? Let's log in and let's see what materials we can use for this specific exercise, okay? And again, just like before, we can what's going on. So the exercise here is telling us basically for the addition that, of course, we check stock availability. If we want to, in this case, we could check using the ZLE T code. We're already familiar with that one. We remember that we had our screenshot with our total on hand, unrestricted, incoming, and so we're going to do again is our reservation. All right, we're going to create our reservation and we're going to go through it with the reservation number. Let's go back here to our cover page, make sure that we start doing our reservation and who is responsible for that. Create reservation in this specific transaction, in this case, the equipment master data local MB21. So let's select this user and log back in.
And hi, Brian. As you're logging in, I was having a private chat with Pietro Contento, and he was just checking in the training environment as well that he was using this T code in order to create a reservation MB21, and apparently the T code wouldn't exist. But on the contrary, if he would type set MMM MB21, then that would work, but the T code displayed will be again MB21. So it was a kind of like a weird thing. I don't know, just so we can just test live what Pietro said in the chat before. So.
All right, thanks, Daniel. Actually, in the transaction before, I used MB21 and it worked. See it again, right? So just like that, MB21, and it takes me right to create a reservation.
Okay, good. So just Pietro, just to let you know that at least from our end, it does work. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Pietro. Over to you, Brian.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're logged in as the master data maintainer local. We're running MB21, so let's say that we're performing these two transactions here, and I'm going to create my reservation. That's the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to follow the steps in my exercise 2, okay, and see exactly what I'm supposed to do here. All right. In our plant, okay, remember our plant and movement type plant is still the same one, US00, but here the movement type is critical. Remember what we did before and what we've done throughout the days. All my transactions are here based on my testing. I used movement type 313, 311, Z21, 511, or any other of my colleagues that have used the same users is doing the same, right? So let's see what movement type we can select here. So it's still not sounding good. I hear. Okay. Sorry, guys. Still very bad?
No, it's better, but sometimes you go. What I'm going to do is I'm posting all your steps in the chat just in case that there's someone who is missing the T code or a particular piece of information. But so far it's okay, but sometimes you still break. Not as bad as before. Sorry to interrupt, Brian.
No problem. Good to know. It's useless for me to speak if no one can hear anyway. So Z21. All right, so I'm going to go back and add my movement type here, Z21. Perfect. And now we generate our reservation. So what we're telling the system, just like we did for return to stock, is that now we are adding to stock, right? We're creating a reservation to add something to stock that has never been there before. Okay, and this seems very similar to what we were just doing before. Actually, the transactions and the steps are very similar. The main change is the addition to stock movement type. Remember the fund that we added in our previous exercise? Still the same here. 10 UNA, cost center, and then the goods recipient, we're still adding inventory as goods recipient. So that's the same thing we're going to do here. Spacebar, 10 UNA, spacebar, my cost center, goods recipient, I'm going to keep the same one. And now here is where I add the materials. So you see exactly what we did. This is kind of like a refresher of this morning's transactions. And now the only thing we're changing here is the actual material, right, that we're adding. So here you go. We have your instructions here. Select material ID from cover page, quantity 1, storage location, and again, valuation type old spares. We're going to go back here. Let's make sure that we're selecting the correct material. So in this case, we can add, you have, I believe in your cover page, you will have these 3 items, okay, that we have to add to stock. In this case, we have here a fixed asset, a vaccines, and an alternator. Okay, we can select one if you wanted to start with one and practice with one. You can select all 3. It's really up to you. And here's where the main difference comes in for me. In the reservation, I can add each one of these materials, right, one by one, in each one of the lines that are here, right, one here, one here, one here, and add the amount and add the batch and do all this info here. If I went straight to Migo, for example, I don't know if I have access to Migo with this account. Yes. And I did the same thing, right? And I selected, for example, here, we have here a return to delivery, a goods receipt. Maybe we can do a goods receipt in this case. Select other. I really don't want to teach you this, so I just want to show you one thing. If I added the exact same movement type here, and we were processing it directly in Migo without a reservation, I have my line items here, the material. See, I would have the option to add one material and quantity for one material and give the instructions for that one piece of material. But where do I go to add more? Okay, if we have find items and list, we can move through items, but in this case, I only have one item. So we would be doing one item at a time. All right, so in this case, if you see the difference with the reservation, we can add a lot more information in one shot. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to copy and paste this information one by one. First, for my first material, that is my fixed asset X-ray, okay, and I wrote here serialize for you guys to have an easy way of following. Okay, in the case, we have quantity 1. Our storage location is still 3101. Let's do the same for our next piece of material, which is the vaccines. Let's copy that, go in and do the same thing. And last is the alternator here. We'll do the same, copy it, and paste our alternator here. We're going to add quantity 1 for each one of these that are being added to stock. We're going to use the same storage location for all 3. And now what else is missing? If I click enter, right, let's say I'm done. Remember this in the morning, we did exactly the same. I click enter, and it's telling me that I should add a valuation, at least a warning, right? This is what the system will do. It'll tell me I'm missing the valuation type for one of the items. But basically, we could be doing the same thing for the fixed asset and for the vaccines at this point if we wanted to. Okay, we can add the information here and say, for example, what the exercise is telling us to do. It says to write all spares. Okay, so these could be old basically because even though we're adding them to stock, it's apparently because they weren't added in the proper way. Or maybe we can even add the new spares, or the new supply. But this specific scenario is for old spares. All right, items that were in this case, we see here. When performing an addition to stock transaction during liquidation, the valuation type may be new, old, or new spares. During reservation, the batch or valuation type can be skipped but must be performed in Migo. Okay, so remember, I have some explanations here. For example, for new items never used or all items used, these are at 0 value. Okay, materials to be received from stock are not new but are used. The valuation type will be set as old supply or old spares. So there is a possibility that even in the addition to stock process, and this is something you can find at the beginning of my page here, the explanation of these scenarios, that, or even in the job aid, that we can talk about. There can be an exceptional scenario like this one here with movement type Z21. Okay, it's possible to add items and specify a value for the receipt. Can be used only in the scenarios indicated above. All right, so let's go back here. I know there's a lot to look at, and let's start adding information for each one of these. So in this case, I can say old spares. For the expendables, I can even add the batch manage here or the one for the fixed assets. But in this case, I'm not. I'm going to leave it like this because the system is only telling me to do this. and nothing else. Since I'm new to this, I don't know what I'm doing. The system is telling me just do this. So I'm going to click OK.
Sorry,
Oh,
Brian.
yeah.
Can I jump in on this?
Yes.
Fixed as addition to stock of materials that are identified as fixed assets must have, there's a prerequisite, let's say. The fixed asset shell, actually the fixed asset record has to be created before the addition to stock itself. It's possibly that you can't include any batch or evaluation type on the fixed asset because of that. It's something that is needed. Once the fixed asset shell, let's say, is created, the MIGO can be performed, and the fixed asset record can be linked to the equipment record. It's a bit of prerequisite that is needed. Otherwise, it cannot be added.
So this is like when we add the fixed asset to a shopping cart and create the shell, right, for the asset. Now, in this case,
the concept is the same, yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, the creation of it could have been done before, just for the exercise to prepare. It's true that it's a critical step, and maybe it's not the best material to use as a demo. Let's see. I'm going to keep going with it. I think that the shell is created. We'll see. The truth is, it should be asking me for evaluation type for that too. But you see now, as soon as I clicked enter, now it's asking me for the vaccine. So I select it here. Let's see what it does with the fixed asset. But thank you for that that heads up.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so let's select our batch here. And again, in this case, we remember what happened this morning. We had batches. In this case, we have valuation types. So we can have batches for material and see what our options are for this material. So I know that for some of you also the assignment of the batch, right? We can select a specific type. For example, in this, I don't know if somebody's intervening. No? Okay, maybe it was just unmuted there. All right, so we can select one of the specific batches that we're going to assign to these vaccines too, but it's also true that pay attention that some of these may have past dates, right? You can change the date for this batch, and then the issue should be over, right? And that happens during MIGO usually. You'll see how that can happen to you. But for example, if I'm looking to the material ending in 1901, the batches that have been assigned for this type of material, 1901, are here. We can select any of these, but now when we perform the MIGO transaction, it may tell us that some of these are set in the past, okay? And we'll have to work on that. So we can select our first batch here, and we have that done. We had a warning message before. Let's click on enter and see if we can move on. So you see what has been, we were discussing just before, the fixed asset here doesn't have even a field for the valuation. So that tells me this is bad news, right? For this fixed asset. We should have a requirement to add the valuation type for this one as well. I'm going to go all the way to MIGO and see what's going on with this. If by any chance I realize that I'm going to make a mistake when I'm processing it, I can just get rid of that fixed asset in the MIGO transaction and not receive it. And then for you guys in your exercises, when you're practicing this, don't use this fixed asset. But let's see. Let's continue. We've done all the process correctly so far. We have the quantity one for each. We've added the basic information, but we have not created our reservation number yet. Okay, it happens once we click on save. All right, now that I click on save, I'll get again, like this morning, we'll have our reservation number here, 5797. Okay, which is actually one number more than what we had this morning for the reservation. And once we have this, we'll go through the steps that we did this morning, right? Remember, we had to check the list of the reservations, we have to approve them, and so on, right? So we did the creation of reservation. Now we can either check the list or I can dive directly into my inbox as the inventory senior user and approve. Since we already used this morning the MB25 transaction, I'm going to jump into the inbox directly and get it approved. Inventory senior user. So what I have to do, again, remember, I copy and paste this user, but again, pay attention, this is the one that has the 123 password, and it's going to be the same case for you. Let's go back to Citrix. We go back as much as we can. We log in again, and this time around we're using the approver 123, and we're checking our inbox. Okay, so here you go. I have several lines now. So why would I have several lines instead of just one? I only did one reservation, right? But you see how the inventory senior user can approve any of these line items and not approve another. Okay, so we can have a reservation generated, and even at this point right now, after what Nicola was just commenting, at this point right now, I made a mistake as the inventory user. In this case, I was the master data local maintainer, and I created a reservation and I added a fixed asset. I didn't really realize that this doesn't have a shell. I didn't even know about this process. I'm just clicking away. The system is not stopping me. It's not telling me, hey, this fixed asset doesn't have an asset. I think everything is fine. I generate my reservation. And at this point, the inventory senior user, of course, the responsibility is to do something about it. If I just click away and go, okay, let's see this, approve. Next, approve. Again, you see the ball is growing in terms of the mess we can make. So again, thank you for that observation, Nicola. Let's see how bad it's going to get. And we can also review.
Actually, it's not exactly a prerequisite. We discovered that the system doesn't have this, let's say, automatism preventing to go ahead, and during a real scenario, right? So we went ahead, but there was a link between the two records that was missing. So at that point in time, after some hours, the system didn't allow to go ahead. So it's, I don't know, I would, let's say, I would say that it's not a real prerequisite, but it would be good to have the fixed asset and all related actions. So it's also a fixed asset accountant that is involved in this to be, let's say, prepared before the initiating the addition to stock process.
So yeah, adding yes, I heard someone else.
Just may add something, and just to be more shade more clarity on the linkage between the equipment record and the asset record. Okay. So once you do an addition to stock of a fixed asset, basically you are creating an equipment record. Okay. So meanwhile, while you are creating an equipment record, which is related to a fixed asset, the inventory or the asset manager should get in touch with the fixed asset accountant FA15 and request the person itself to create a shell for a fixed asset in the fixed asset register. The FA15 will create a shell based on the information, on financial information provided by the asset manager. And once the shell is ready, the shell will be posted by the FA16. At that stage, once the asset record is posted, then the inventory can link the equipment record to the fixed asset. This is a mandatory action that needs to be done and should not be overlooked by anybody, because doing so, you do not capitalize the asset record. Okay, so it's very important when you do an addition to stock of fixed asset, always to bear in mind that an asset record must be created.
Okay, Claudia, you're correct, right? And so is Nicola. But again, I want to emphasize that this is part of a failure of the system, not flagging certain issues when you're trying to do something.
No, Joe, sorry, Joe, allow me that. This is not a lack, it's not an issue of the system. This is because actually there are two different registers, and this is for IPSAS, okay? IPSAS requires to maintain a fixed asset register where you maintain the asset record. And then you have the equipment master record, which is a different register.
Okay, so my question is, okay,
So
my question is this: if you're creating an equipment that is an asset, yeah,
okay,
which is different than creating a normal equipment item, correct?
yes, correct.
Okay, so somewhere in that element where you're creating equipment that is actually an asset, it should flag you and say, excuse me, you should speak to somebody, or is it FA6 or something to alert you, right? Not to continue on until the fixed asset is created.
No, it's not. As said, the fixed asset register is something out of the books. I mean, there are two different books, okay, and they are not linked. The linkage can be done only by the manually by the inventory user. As said, unfortunately, we need to keep in account something. SAP. In SAP, we have so many manual things. If you're recalling back in Galileo, when you do the issue voucher, I'm just giving you an example, okay? When you did the issue voucher in Galileo, automatically the system changes the status. In Umoja, you have to do it manually. I mean, many steps in SAP are relying on manual entries or manual input by the user. Okay, SAP is being customized for the UN. So and many customizations, you know, are to be done manually.
Okay, let me ask you this. This is for everybody. Okay, do you get the fixed asset created first and then create your equipment record? Which?
The fixed asset first, the shell.
No, sorry.
No?
First you create the equipment record.
First is the equipment record. Okay.
First is the equipment record. The equipment record can be created no matter about the asset record. Once you create the equipment record, meanwhile, you have to provide financial information to the FA15, meaning you have to provide to the FA15 the following information: acquisition date, PO, PID, description, and value of the equipment. Once the fixed asset, the FA15 receive all this information, then it creates another shell of the asset record, which put all the information, including depreciation. There is a 20% increase regarding blah blah blah, etc. Okay, so the equipment record can be created independently if there is an asset record or not. And in fact, if you look at the system, if you look at inventory, you can find many equipment records which do not have a fixed asset assigned. You can find many samples of that.
And Claudio,
you can find either equipment 15 with a fixed asset record linked. So there are many mistakes in the system.
So Claudio, like if I continue with the processes I'm doing now.
Sorry. We can. I would just.
No. But I'm going back to your comment. That's where I'm going to. If I continue with the process now, right, and I process Migo, and I think we'll see what happens when I do Migo. I'm going to continue with the mistake. Okay, I'm going to continue doing this and see what the system tells me at a certain point. Is that, and now when I update the equipment record, right, for that fixed asset. Because there'll be an equipment record. I'm going to log in as the...
there will be an equipment record without the fixed asset.
Exactly, right? So I'm generating a mistake that is very common in the system now.
Yeah. But let's say that it's not a system mistake.
No, exactly. It's a human
part
mistake.
of the business.
But now, another thing I wanted to add to this too. Those that are going to be deployed to the mission in liquidation, do they have to understand the steps before? Do they have to perform them? Or is this going to be done before that and they are oblivious to it?
Brian, from my point of view, this is generally speaking, whoever is a user using Umoja needs to understand that any action taken in the inventory has a financial implication. No matter about the action you are taking, about the transaction you are taking. So you must be aware there is a financial implication when you do something. You are not only touching quantities, you're touching values.
Exactly. So, and that's clear to me.
It's very important that people are aware of processes and people are aware of what they are doing in the system.
If I may?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry to add, because I think it's already, Elena is already put in some comments in the chat as well. First of all, thank you, Claudia. I think it was very important to highlight this fact, because we are going now to affect the books from the financial point of view and not the operative inventory, right? So that's very important. But then, I don't know, just to put into the context the situation, I will ask whoever has more experience, how frequent do you usually add to a stock a fixed asset in the mission? I mean, is it really normal? Is it a normal procedure, or it's something that is rare that occurs during the liquidation process? And I'm not saying this because it's not important. It's just this is really important because the asset master record has to be created because we are affecting directly the books. So that's for sure very important. But I'd like to know how frequent this occurs, because we are adding a fixed asset. It must be a generator, a vehicle that it was not in the inventory before.
Okay, I can answer. I can answer part of that from a liquidation perspective. In the case of missions that are closing where we have turnkey contracts for fuel, where our organization is paid for all of the installation plus the vehicles, or maybe even some fuel tanks and generators related to that contract. When it comes to the end of the mission, all that equipment returns to the UN has to be added into the system.
If may I add
can I sorry, Claudio, can I add something to what Joe said and to answer to Daniel? Just to give an idea, when Joe and I went to UNAMID for the workshop assessment, it was said that officially that UNAMID has between the 10 and 15% of their stock, of their assets, not recorded in the system. Okay, so this gives you an idea how much assets are outside the inventory. Now, not all of them are going to be fixed assets, but you can have an idea that looking at the size of UNAMID, how many items are fixed assets that needs to be created. Now, and my 2 cents on this subject, the system is reflecting IPSAS standards, no, Claudio? And by putting a PID or by following certain commodities and thresholds, the system recognized when an item is a fixed asset. I don't understand myself, as well as Joe said, why the system doesn't flag me when I don't do a correct operation. I'm sorry, I still beyond me to understand why it's a user who has to understand or who has to know, which I agree with you, should know what they're supposed to do. But this organization spent millions on this system, and this type of system should prevent people making mistakes, which affect books, money, value, and etc. This is my personal opinion. Thank you.
Gianluca, I can answer to you very, very easily. As I said, I agree with you 100%. Now, I give you an example, okay? Warehouse management and inventory management, okay? Issuance of equipment. If you do a good issue from the inventory, okay, if you do not perform the TO from warehouse, you create a discrepancy between the two, okay? And this is not flagged. I mean, unfortunately, we're working in the different modules, which somehow, due to how SAP is configured, they are not linked between them. Fixed asset register is something else, is another option. As said, those are modules for which it requires a manual intervention from human being. It's not something that is being, how can I say, automated by the system, okay? And unfortunately, this is how the SAP is. And I guess that I to New York, but they will give you the same answer.
But Claudio,
they are very well aware how the system works and how the limitation of the system is in terms of automatization.
Okay, Claudio, this is my last comment on this, because we keep going around in circles about automation. For sure, right, what everybody says is correct, but let's be clear about something. We've just nearly completed, we're still working on the inventory, or we're nearly there, of the Minijuice liquidation in Umoja. And that has thrown up a lot of issues that needs to be addressed by headquarters, including automation. I'm sorry, yes. Right? And we will raise this issue with them and tell them, Minijuice is what? 15% of Unimid. We had 12,000 assets in Minijuice. We're talking about 50 to 60, maybe more thousand assets that's in the system. And as Gianluca quite rightly said, there's another several thousand that's not in the system.
So, I agree with you 100%, Joe. I fully agree with you. But I give you also another, if may I, regarding the creation of a fixed asset the question from Daniel before. Taking the example of Unimid, okay, and talking about Pyro. With Pyro, we optimize and we codified whatever was in the inventory, basically in stock. Now, what is not kept in consideration is whatever is in use, which is the 70% of our stock holdings worldwide. Okay, this is 70%. At a certain point, when you do a liquidation, you have to return to stock whatever is in use, right? And between all those assets, all this equipment that is in use, there are many records which have been wrongly codified as equipment while they are fixed asset. When you are returning them to stock, you have to recodify them again. And then there is all the need to do the creation of a fixed asset, etc., etc. I don't know if this is clear.
No, very clear, at least from my end, Claudio. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, Joe and Gianluca. Yes,
if I may add to what Gianluca was mentioning about that 15% of items, but currently we don't know what they are, that have to be added to the stock. They are not returning to stock. They have been added to the stock. If those items fall under the category of fixed asset, I don't know. Okay, let's keep it general. If this equipment fall under the category of fixed asset, the shell has to be created as well. If I don't know, I don't have idea. I've never been on site to say what are these items, but whatever addition to stock and of items that are also in the category of fixed asset, based on the product ID that is chosen to link. If there's a fixed asset, there's a shell that has to be created for financial purposes. The fixed assets go straight to the financial statement, right? And have to be recorded, have to be accounted for. Also, from the financial point of view, not only from the inventory and warehouse point of view, also from the financial point of view. That's the complexity and the completeness I see. Let's say I foresee.
Nicola, I agree with you, but there has been exceptions to what you just said. Okay, it happened in Minijuiced, where assets that were supposed to be from Galileo put in Umoja into the system by Minijuice didn't do it, right? And it was 300 or 400 assets, right? But for the value of the assets that was deemed at that time, right, during the liquidation, we agreed with New York and they agreed with us that it was not feasible or worthwhile to add those assets into the system at that stage of the game, but just take a note of them and add them to the file and dispose them. It's the same in Unimid, believe it or not. I've seen some Unimid files where they've handed over hundreds of prefabs, right, that are not in the system. Why? Because it's probably not cost effective to add them into the system for one day and take them out a second day. I don't know, but you know, Unimid is a big scenario, and that's. I mean, we don't have time to go into all of the issues with Unimid, but we know there's a lot of issues with Unimid. So, I think let's just leave it at that and let the guys carry on. Otherwise, we're losing more time. Okay, thanks.
I agree once again with you. That's to pick a small portion of the entire process and. Let it fit wherever is needed. That's let's say, the concept. But yes, then there's a business choice, a business decision to, let's say, to shorten the process or to have a different agreement with the entity. That's all.
Yeah.
It's a small process that fits somewhere.
Thank you guys for the input and all the discussion. Now, I really didn't want to interrupt you because we haven't had a discussion all day, and I think this was extremely important to discuss because see what just happened in this exercise. If I'm a person, because I know you guys have a lot of background on this, but if I'm someone that's sitting in this classroom right now, this is the first time I learned to do an addition to stock transaction. I'm going to be sent to the mission to do a liquidation. Do I have to do, like I'm talking about creating manually in the system, this shell of the fixed asset? Is this something somebody else is going to do? And my job in the liquidation is just to do the reservation? How, like, to what extent does your responsibility go in liquidation? Does someone, everybody in this training needs to know how to create that shell of the asset, the equipment record, all those steps prior to doing the reservation, or they're just starting where I started in this exercise? Because that's also something I would like to know before I'm sent somewhere, right? How much more do I need to learn from this process? Because right now I start the process here, right, with the check stock and create reservation, but maybe I should have started 25 steps ago.
No.
And Brian?
Yes.
Just let me jump in a little bit, just to comment about about what we were discussing before. Usually the asset record and the equipment record are linked because in a normal process of receiving the material through a good receipt process, the shell of the asset is created at shopping cart level. When the purchase order is approved, the financial information is transferred to the asset record, and when the good receipt is performed, the asset is capitalized automatically by the system. So the system creates two records, one equipment record and one asset record that are linked. But in this case, when we are adding to stock, is one of the exceptions when the shell of the asset, all the financial information and the capitalization of the assets, calculating the actual cost of this asset needs to be done, let's say in an exceptional case. So as our colleagues mentioned, FA15 is creating the shell, and the FA16 needs to capitalize these assets before performing the addition to stock transaction.
Thanks, Sol. That's very, very clear. So I think that also answers the questions we saw before and what I just asked now, right? So in a sense, I wouldn't have to be worrying about this, right, when I'm performing this transaction.
Exactly.
Exactly. This has been done. All I would have to do is start my transaction from here, right, and say, okay, reservation.
No, Brian, sorry, it's not like that. It's coming from PO.
I know what you mean.
The system creates automatically an asset record. When it's done manually, say the inventory, whoever creating the equipment record must be aware that once create the equipment record, he or she needs to communicate to the FA15 for the creation of the shell. It's something that this person needs to know.
That's clear, but I'm talking about if I come into the last step, if I come into the reservation step, I don't have, my responsibility is not to do any of the prior steps to this, right? This should all be taken care of. That's what I want to know too, because should we be teaching the students that are here now in this room listening to us how to do the creation of the asset too, how to do every other step before that? Okay, that's where I want to get to.
Responsibility for the class, for the class is to know how to create an equipment, how to do an addition to stock.
Exactly.
But it's also their responsibility, is also class responsibility to be aware that if they're creating an addition to stock of a fixed asset, they need to communicate to the fixed asset accountant.
There you go.
Yes.
Because they don't have the FA15 role.
They don't need to know how to do the addition, the creation of a shell. They don't need to know. It's not their job. It's not our job to do to know how to do it.
It was not even in GDP. It was not even in GDP.
But it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to know that the process requires us to communicate with the fixed asset accountant for the creation of the shell.
Yeah. And it's very important. It's very important that this is the first time I'm seeing this process. I know already that, wow, if we are going to add to stock a fixed asset, well, I have to communicate this is a serious issue because we're going to touch and impact the financial books of my mission. So I think it was a great discussion because it's one of the key points that eventually will have to be tackled once you guys are deployed. So communication is really important, but from the, let's say, training point of view, you guys probably will not be affected as an FA-15, so you don't have any responsibility whatsoever to create any shell. But on the contrary, you will have to communicate, or at least giving a heads up, guys. I'm adding to stock an equipment that it will be eventually a fixed asset. That's it, I think, from my end.
Sorry, Angelo, just one more question. I understand these materials are left at the end of the project. So do they have to do this process even if the material is considered, let's say, depreciated or amortized, or I mean with a value that is less than the threshold to be considered a fixed asset?
Okay, now regarding liquidation, as said, and allow me to say this concept regarding liquidation as well in Pyro. Whenever an equipment which is in use is in stock in inventory, okay, has been selected for write-off. Also, if is a fixed asset but is not being recognized as a fixed asset, can go for write-off. It doesn't make sense to change it, making a fixed asset, creating a shell, and then write it off. Okay, but let's put the case that you want to transfer a server from a liquidation mission to another mission, and this server was not recognized as a fixed asset. You have to recodify creating a shell and transfer to the other mission, following the intermission transfer of a fixed asset, no matter about the depreciated value.
Claudio, you're correct, right? We done the same in Minijust, and
Right.
Nicola was there.
And that's
Nicola knows that we had assets that were not in the system, but because we were moving to Binu, we had to create them in the system. Okay, he's right, fuel trucks, exactly. So, I mean, yes, but in the main, if the assets are undervalued or are already past life expectancy, there's a managerial decision taken that it's not worth it to do that. If we're transferring the assets to another mission, yes, we do it.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
And if you are transferring, before transferring the asset, it's the sending entity, let's say, creating the asset shell.
It's the sending mission.
The sending mission.
Okay. It's like it's the same. Let's for example take an example. Yeah.
And sorry guys, let's not talk about transfers now.
No,
because we're doing that tomorrow. I think just for the sake of everyone else listening, right? We stick to the addition to stock and the alarm that was raised about the fixed asset, because if we start jumping everywhere else, then we lose everyone else. I think if we stick to the main point of addition to stock, watch out with the fixed assets. Personally, I have a feeling that these materials already have the shell created. All I have to do is worry about my transactions. The system doesn't flag me. I keep going like I did right now. The approver is about to approve the reservation. He or she doesn't realize either. All they do is approve. This process continues, right? So we're going to go all the way to Migo with this fixed asset. Now, I think maybe we could have left the fixed asset out of this transaction, but I like the idea that we did leave it because it created a lot of discussion and it made us learn all something that is important. We know that it's not our responsibility to create the asset shell, but it's our responsibility to, realize that, we're doing an addition to stock of a fixed asset, so let's do something about it. So let's just, I know, Daniel, you were going to jump in, but I think it was probably, to reroute the conversation or not.
Exactly, because we are going through transfers, and I think it was very clear that, I mean, you just hit on the nail. I think we can resume, yes.
All right, and especially because we only have another 10 minutes before Vidia and Kirill jump in. So at this point, what I'm going to continue with the mistake, all right? Because this is the training environment. I'm going to continue approving, as would happen maybe if all I have to do is just double click on approve. I'm going on vacation this weekend and I don't want any problems, right? So approve and approve here too. And this reservation is approved. I didn't even look at it. I don't even know there are fixed assets in it. I trust blindly in the user that has created this reservation. So right away, we finished this step. And now again, even if we don't make it all the way to the end, right, of this, the transactions are all very similar. What is different is here, right, the Migo transaction. The Migo transaction here is the senior asset accountant, and we were talking about this, right? Now suddenly, somebody who has not performed this transaction so far during virtual goods receipt, physical goods receipt, return to stock is now jumping into the scene and is going to have to do this transaction. Here's where the flag should be raised, I believe, you know, the last time. This is like the goalkeeper of the issue getting bigger. At this point, we should realize what's going on. So let's just quickly log in as the senior asset accountant here. And let's see what Migo tells us in the training environment. Okay, so now I'm FA16, and I'm basically just working, adding my Migo transaction here. Sorry, I haven't logged in as the FA16. Let me do that quickly. I'm going to use my reservation number, and let's see now what I do at this point in the process, right? With my role and my responsibility, I should be able to realize that there's an issue here. So what do we have? We have a goods receipt, a goods issue, transfer posting. So we have a goods receipt again from a reservation. In this case, let's see what the reservation number was, 5797. And we're going to execute this. And here you go. So right now, my role is the FA16, correct? My role is the senior asset accountant. So I'm going to look at this in Migo, and I should still be able to stop something bad from happening at this point, right? I realize there's an X-ray machine. There's a fixed asset here. I realize there's no batch, there's no valuation at this point, okay? I think here is where, you know, the last person should stop the issue from happening. So let's see. Basically, my vaccine seems to be ready with my alternator seems to be ready, but there's nothing in the X-ray. I'm just going to check. I'm going to click on OK for everything. I'm going to go to my first X-ray machine, click on OK there too, and check. Let's see what the system says. A reason has to be entered for movement type Z21. Okay, so that's all it's telling me, that there's a reason that has to be entered. Okay, and let's see where this reason is. Maybe it's in the equipment, or maybe it's the unrestricted type that I'm receiving. Let me go one by one and see what it is that it's telling me to fill in. And also, by the way, it's in your exercise. If we follow the transaction all the way to Migo, and let me just run down to Migo here. And here we are, correct? So we're adding to stock, and it seems that we have to add, see, reason for movement. Okay, I'm not just making this up. This is in the exercise that we're going to forward to you as well. So where is that reason? It's under the Where tab. So let's go to our transaction here. Click on Where for the fixed asset here, Where, and now there is a reason for movement. Let's click on the matchbox and let's see what reason. In this case, left from construction, left from service, or PO order correction, or maybe even a conversion. In the exercise here, what we're telling you is reason for movement, and I think we select number 3 from a service contract. Okay, that's why we're talking about old equipments here. So we select reason 3, okay, and we could check again to see if maybe I need to do something else. And you see maintain serial numbers for total quantity. That's probably for that fixed asset. Let's see, and we have 2 other reasons to add, so we can do that directly from here. If we move through items, I can select my vaccines and select the reason here too. I believe we're selecting the same reason for each one of them. I don't think for vaccines. Let me see, because we're not returning them used, I don't think, in this case. Okay, so we can even add the vaccines here. Let's just keep this for time's sake. I know we have 3 minutes, and I don't want to change everything else at last minute. And the alternator here, do the same reason for movement. Select the reason, and let's click on check one more time and see what else I would be missing. I'm looking for that flag for the fixed asset at some point in the transaction. My batch says it has already been posted in stock, but it's only a yellow warning. I could even review that, going to my vaccines and checking where the batch is, okay, right here, and see that, All right, there is a date here, 2020, 12, so that's a whole year ahead, so it seems I'm okay. It's true that this batch has already been used, but it's only a warning message. The only one that is required seems to be the X-ray serial numbers. So you see at this point, if I create the serial number here automatically, because this has never been in stock, and now maybe I check, now I only have a warning for the batch, so I'm still allowed to go on. Even if my role is an FA16, and here's where I should raise the alarm, I'm checking, it's fine, batch is okay, and I can just post. And let's see, the system is not going to tell me anything and create my material document at this point. All right, and that's the material document that we would be using to perform the rest of our transactions in the warehouse, okay? Remember, for everyone, if now we wanted to display the warehouse, remember, display, material document, you add the material document you just created, which is this one, you execute, and in the warehouse management tab is where you have the info you need. The warehouse, AF1, the TR number 612. Okay, and then you can process the transfer requirement, the transfer order, and so on. All right, so all the steps that follow are exactly the same that we perform for return to stock. And you can do them again yourself. But I think it was definitely a good run for this addition to stock. I didn't expect such a discussion, but it was great. These discussions are good. And you see, guys, even logging in as the FA16, let's say the system is not stopping me, but of course at this point is where the FA16 should inquire on this X-ray machine before processing. Here I only have 3 items. Maybe I did a reservation for 150 items, and I'm not going to be looking at each one of them. I don't know the reality of things, right, that you're going to be facing. But again, there is a last line of defense. It's in the Migo transaction, and here is where somebody should raise the flag if it hasn't been done before.
Yeah, especially, Brian, if we are talking about the FA16, which will tell another colleague in his or her office to create as an FA15 the asset master record linked to the serial number already created in Migo. So I think a way to link all the discussions that we already had in the system is right there, right? When you click on Migo, go through the transaction, create the serial number, and then you talk to your colleague in the same, please, I just performed Amigo with this serial number. Please, we have to create an asset master record, link both, because we don't have to have any problems in the books afterwards. Exactly, right.
Exactly, right? So we have our serial numbers. Everything was fine. The system didn't stop me. But my role as the FA16 is to notice these things, right? Just like a buyer reviews the shopping carts before it's let's say we process the goods that were going to go to the mission. In this case, somebody has to stop it at some point. If it wasn't the inventory user, it's the inventory senior user. If not, it's at this point in the transaction. Okay, but there's a lot of places where somebody should stop this from keeping on going. All right, I know it's 4 o'clock. We may have our HQ colleagues already in the session. Remember, guys, the transaction, basically what we've done up to today with the addition to stock is right here. The Migo transaction, every other step that you see from here, a update equipment record, transfer requirement, TO, list of TOs, confirmed transfer is exactly the same. The only other thing we didn't do in this transaction is the notification, but it would have been the same process as before, just choosing a different code. Instead of return to stock, it would be addition to stock. Okay, I'm not sure if, let me just check quickly in the participation list. Are we okay? Any discussion maybe before, or should we already move on?
I think, yeah, move on. I just placed the evaluation for the afternoon session in the chat, and yes, seems that the discussion that we did have orally, you know, it's staying there in the chat as well with, you know, several points of agreement, let's say. But as Claudio he correctly pointed out before, communication is of utmost importance especially, in any place of the life cycle of the in property management, but especially now in terms of liquidation process. Now we have to really understand that who is preceding our transactions and who we are affecting in order to be in constant contact, because we really want to do a cleanup process in the books and in the mission. Yes. Over to you, Brian. Thanks.
Exactly. Thanks, Daniel. So great discussion today. Thank you all for joining in and bringing in your valuable insight. That's why we have you here as well. And now I do see in the participants list, we have, I saw Vidya before a second ago, and maybe we can, I can just add her, or Daniel, if you, I see her here. So hello, good morning, Vidya.
Yeah.
Hi,
Good
good
to
morning.
presenter.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Yeah, we just joined. It's me and Kirill should also be online. So I think we both are here. Sorry for being late. We were just in another VTC.
And no problem at all. It's only 4 minutes. Vidya, welcome, and also Kirill, welcome. Good morning to both of you. I don't think I saw Jack yet. No, I don't. He's not there yet, but it's all yours. The floor is yours. You can take over anytime.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Today I would try to talk about audit queries and audit observations and recommendations. And then tomorrow we would like to sort of transition from the audit to the strategic guidance, closing instructions, and key management actions to deal with these audits. So if you allow me, I see I can do that. I will share the presentation to try to guide the discussion. Yeah, I hope you can see it.
Yes, we can, Kirill.
Okay, thank you. So the audit observations, the reference documents, which I will also share with you for inclusion in the package for all the attendants and the attendees. These are the 4 audit reports that have been issued during the last 2 calendar years, 17-18 for volume 1, and the 2 financial years, 17-18, 18-19 for peacekeeping. The last audit on 2019 is right now, we are interacting with the audit team, and we will of course share if anything comes as soon as anything is available. But straight to the point, what have been the issues that the Board of Auditors have been raising, and what have been the cross-cutting issues and the main topics and the main themes that come up. From the audits on the calendar years, meaning volume 1, these are all special political missions, offices away, regional commissions, and the headquarters, of course. The key observations are summarized in this slide. To start with, something that comes almost every time when the discussions, when we interact with the auditors, is the requirement to strengthen the system of asset capitalization and the requirement to strengthen internal controls over disposal of assets. In practical terms, these are the in and outs of our asset and inventory records, and these are the ways our statements get either overstated or understated. And this is, of course, having a significant sometimes implication for the audits. In terms of asset capitalization, the key points have been related to the fact that often we have assets that are exceeding the threshold for capitalization, but do not have associated, or equipment does not have associated asset master record, and vice versa. Assets that are capitalized but are well below the capitalization threshold. And this, in most of the cases, relates or results from an inappropriate use of the material master for creation of shopping carts. It's either picking a non-just material for acquiring a fixed asset or picking a just material for acquiring non-capitalized items. In the extreme cases, even assets or equipment or shopping carts are created for these items by using not serialized material. So all these items, all these instances, if not detected at the time of the shopping cart creation and approval, and during the purchase order approval by the buyers and procurement officers, ultimately then result in problems at good receipt. This is the time when, in many instances, we are confronted with these issues. And at that point of time, we end up with having data issues for inventory, for assets, for equipment. So very important point to put in place measures and somehow improve the quality of the shopping carts. And I'm sure that our colleagues, and maybe you, Brian, and colleagues from the training team are already looking into some training opportunities for source to acquire. This is based on the level of incidence and how many times it is raised in every entity, appears to be an area we need to really make sure that we straighten this up, as it affects across the board everything related to assets and inventory management and ultimately financial reporting. The next point relates to capitalization of intangible assets. Now, I acknowledge it is not that much applicable to field missions, but it is very much applicable to the OACT and the headquarters offices away. And here, correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues from GSC, I believe that it might be applicable for the UNGSC as well as in terms of intangible assets. So this area is gaining speed. Auditors are placing more and more attention to it. Cleanup of the data from Galileo. Now, this audit, this was a recommendation, observation was made for the SPMs, but we would also see it in the subsequent audits for the peacekeeping. No need to say how important it is for us to maintain the lessons and the good practice that was captured and established during the physical inventory reconciliation and optimization project, which was a project, one-time activity, but it is important to make sure that the best practice, the playbook, the supplemental guidance that was issued by the ASG ASG Office of Supply Chain Management is really mainstreamed, and the activities of Bureau really become standard business practice for managing of inventories, equipment, and assets. Then in previous years, we had observations from the auditors related to the valuation of assets. Namely, the recommendation was to explore opportunities for applying actual cost instead of standard cost. Based on analysis and assessment of pros and cons and cost implications, you colleagues are aware that the actual cost methodology was adopted for valuation of assets under construction. So since 2018, all assets under construction and all new projects have to follow the actual cost, meaning that cost collectors needs to be created in Umoja, cost collected against the WBS elements and settled to the asset under construction on a monthly basis. So this was the one of the implications of this observation. At the same time, we continue applying the standard cost approach for valuation of equipment, where the capitalization is done based on standard percentage, capturing the associated cost. And here I would like to mention that this standard percentages per plant have been revised by the OPP-AFB, our office, by Finance Division in the last two reporting periods for both Volume 1 and Volume 2, meaning all plants have received revised standard capitalization percentage. And this has been done based on analysis of the associated cost for purchasing of assets for each specific plant. So I would also share these two documents with you, just in case some of the colleagues have not come across with them. These new standard costs have been built in Umoja. So as long as the transactions are properly recorded, the standard costs are properly captured. But it is important to keep in mind in case you are creating any assets manually and if there are any sort of adjustments you need to make. Last point on the audits from Volume 1 relates to the requirement to adopt homogeneous IPSAS compliant policy of inventory and to apply that across all entities. Here it was focused on Volume 1, but as a result and based on these recommendations, what has happened in the last reporting period was that we have discontinued the notion of categorizing and reporting on financial and non-financial inventory. All consumables and supplies that are in stock are now recorded and reported as inventory. There is no financial, non-financial. This has been a key change during the last reporting period. And the other aspect of this recommendation was that we have extended this application from only peacekeeping and political missions to all entities. And as a result, offices away, regional commissions, tribunals, and headquarters departments as well are now reporting all consumables and supplies that are in stock as inventory for the purposes of preparation of financial statements. Here is what we got in terms of audit observations for the previous reporting period in peacekeeping, 17-18, and you can see that many of the issues are similar. I would just like to again re-emphasize the recall, so rather the emphasis of matter we got during 17-18 on the management of inventory and on the physical verification on assets and equipment. This was largely attributed to the fact that in 2017-18 we discontinued or decommissioned Galileo and migrated to Umoja with the natural learning curves and operationalizing and stabilizing of the processes. During the last year of 18-19, across the board, we managed to demonstrate substantial improvement, and I would like to express gratitude to everyone who is involved in property management. All missions and the service centers have really made substantial step forward, which we are trying to sustain. Master data, I already spoke about this in the context of the previous slide. In the context of the entities, the master data management is really becoming, or the critical implication is the proper creation of shopping carts and selecting appropriate product IDs and making sure that the data that comes into the inventory and the asset holding is clean. And here the role of the Global Service Center and the colleagues we work with on ensuring such quality measures is really important. During the last year, the next point relates to the identification of non-serialized equipment, and colleagues who are dealing with financial reporting or FA15 roles are aware that during the second half of the last financial year, close to the end of June, we have introduced a new serialization profile. This is the so-called ZENS serialization profile, which identifies identifying materials that are of equipment nature, however, are not serialized. For example, just to give you an example, these are the monitors, or in some places even the mobile phones. Based on interactions with auditors, we have done work, and jointly with the colleagues in finance division and also in DOS, we have reviewed the material master records and mapped them to make sure that all such items that are of equipment nature but are not serialized have been mapped to this serialization profile, and going forward this is built in the master data management. This new serialization profile has a key implication for financial reporting. It's not that much impacting the operations. I would say it does not at all. However, at year-end, for financial reporting purposes, items that are associated or have serialization profile ZENS, along with items that have that are of serialized with serialization profile 01 or 05, are excluded from the inventory holdings for financial reporting. But this is, I would say, the only implication in terms of financial reporting. Without it doesn't really have any implication on the operations. The common approach to property management, this was a key observation that resulted from the fact that following the introduction of Umoja, we, saying we meaning all of us, in most of the areas continued working in silos. Sort of the highly integrated nature of Umoja was sort of not fully embraced. And this resulted in this recommendation, which we are trying to rectify by working closely across the functional areas with colleagues in finance, with colleagues in supply chain management, and trying to sort of introduce more end-to-end understanding of the processes, and making sure that whatever we do with clear understanding of the implications for the next steps. For example, how inaccuracies in the shopping carts affect the inventory, how material transactions and postings affect the financial reporting, and so on. So this is something that is a process, and we are going through it, and of course learning as we move from one another. We already spoke about the Galileo decommissioning and the need to mainstream the Bureau project lessons and practices. So I would move to the next slide. And these are the results from the last year's financial year in peacekeeping. You can see that, of course, the requirement to sustain the results from the Bureau project, this is the last point, was raised very solidly, and very strong recommendation by the auditors, which we are trying to do. But apart from that, there is a range of observations that relates to mission reconfiguration, drawing down, liquidation. This was natural because in the past years we closed two peacekeeping missions, UNMIL and UNUSI. In the last year we closed MINUJUST, and as we speak, UNAMID is undergoing transition and subject to decision by the Security Council later in May. it may go into more accelerated or slower pace into drawing down and liquidation, but UNAMID as the largest peacekeeping operation is really a substantive effort that needs to be tackled properly. So in terms of mission drawing down and reconfiguration, the key recommendations from the auditors are to make sure that all decisions are properly documented, meaning that all decisions and all disposal actions are documented. Every case should have a case file with cost-benefit analysis, identification of potential beneficiaries, and also every such exercise should involve lessons learning, capturing of lessons, and of course building on the previous lessons from previous entities, closure. These observations were largely driven by the groundwork of the auditors, which they did in MONUSCO during the mission's reconfiguration and closing several locations, and also based on the liquidation of UNMIL. But we can see these are very applicable to all the liquidations exercises, including to MINUJUST, which was just closed last year and which is, as we speak, now going through these residual reconciliation activities. And last but not least, very important point that the requirement to adhere and properly utilize the respective financial regulations and rules for making disposal decisions. And Virya yesterday spoke about the efforts and what we do in terms of making sure that proper guidance is there to cover such decisions. And before finishing with what I wanted to share, just wanted to say that while we are still working and the guidance is coming your way, don't hesitate if you colleagues have any concerns or if you have any doubt on the application of any financial regulation or rule on in your day-to-day work, don't hesitate to reach to us. I mean, Jack Howard, our chief, or Virya, or myself, and we will make everything possible to come up with proper interpretation or guidance so that you can proceed in the most appropriate way. So I would like to stop here and see if you colleagues have any comments or questions before you call it a day. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Kirill. Thank you. Very good presentation. Thank you very much. A lot of insight. I know we still have 32 attendees with us listening, so please, now's the time if there's any question. Even one of the trainers, if we have any other questions ourselves. I know it's been a long day.
Carol, I have a question for you in relation to gifting.
Yes, Joe.
I believe it's not mandatory to have a gifting committee. Am I correct?
Yes, Joe, I will start, and Virya, please feel free to step in if you feel you need to. Yes, the understanding and our position is that the gifting committee is not a mandatory requirement. And even in the instances where it is created, its main terms of reference should focus on reviewing the disposal actions, identification of beneficiaries in the context of the mission programs, meaning purely programmatic considerations. And it should not circumvene or bypass or undermine the role of the property survey boards and the officials with delegated authority to make the final decisions on the disposal of assets. And of course, based on experience, the gifting committees have been created in instances where the volume of the disposals and the volume of requests for acceptance of gifts have been big, to sort of make sure that these decisions are properly prioritized and linked to the programmatic activities. But you are right, we don't really view this as a mandatory committee. It is there, or it may be created to support and facilitate the proper decisions for sort of deciding the proper disposal methods. Virya or Jack, if you want to add something on this, please.
No, I think Kirill said it all. I think we want to make sure that it's actually the role of the property survey boards that are most relevant with respect to, well, at least with respect to adhering to the FRRs. Sorry, Virya, if you wanted to add any comments. Over.
Thanks, Jack. No, just one thing. I mean, just to echo what Kirill has just already said. So, yeah, Joy, they are not required to be created. But just one thing, we do know, though, that we have seen that this is something that has been used in the past liquidation. So it is not uncommon that this gifting committee is created. A recommendation is if this is done, if the delegated authority or the head of entities retain that such board is required to strengthen that the accountability of the gift, or that process, basically. So a recommendation is for them to have a term of reference very clear from what they do, and to make sure, as Kirill said, that in no circumstances this board is seen as a replacement of the board of survey, the local or the headquarters, which have a consolidated and very clear role in terms of disposing of property.
Yeah, of course you're correct. But when we're down in missions or talking about liquidations, and especially when it comes to gifting, we always ensure that if they are setting up a gifting committee, that they don't overrule the property management board or anything like that. However, it is a good way of keeping account of the process of gifting and who authorized the gifting and who agreed to the gifting, as the auditors have asked several times themselves. Thanks.
Can I just comment? Hello.
Yes, Ivo, please. You're a bit distant, but we'll make an effort.
I have to tap on the microphone. I don't know if it's better.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
It's better, yes.
Okay, yeah. When I tap on the microphone, then it works better. The purpose of gifting committee at the end is actually to make sure that post-liquidation activities done by host government, etc., partners throughout the mandate will be continued. So that's one of the reasons then consideration should be taken. Those that are partners that have been involved in projects can continue somehow. So they are like priority. But of course, we follow our rules, financial rules. It's just to a recipient. They are selected based on decision by the mission, considering then continuation of UN work once UN is gone.
Thank you, Ivo. Thank you for this. Brian, any other?
Thank you, Kirill, and thank you, Ivo. I don't see any other comments in the chat, and I don't know if anyone else wants to join in. Thank you, Joseph and Ivo as well. If nothing else, just please let us know. I'll give you guys one more minute. And if not, we can call it a day. Again, thank you for joining us for the half-hour session in the afternoon. Jack, Vidya, and Kirill.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all. And I think, yeah, no one else is joining, so we're done for the day from this side. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to all.